She spoke softly, almost too calmly, but the pilot brushed her off. When the first explosion rattled the fuselage, it was too late. The plane glided steadily above the Atlantic, its cabin filled with the usual blend of muted chatter, the hum of the engines, and the occasional clink of glasses from the beverage cart. It was Flight 417, a commercial red-eye from Lisbon to New York, carrying 2112 passengers, families, business travelers, students, and tourists. Among them sat Alara Miles, a woman in her late 30s, window seat, row 14A. Her appearance was unremarkable at first glance, dark hair tied neatly back, a worn leather satchel tucked beneath the seat in front of her. Yet there was something about her posture, the way her eyes scanned the cabin, the way her ears seemed attuned to every sound, that marked her as different. The man in the aisle seat beside her had tried to start a casual conversation earlier. Alara had smiled politely but offered little. Her gaze was fixed too often on the crew, the layout of the cabin, the subtle rhythms of a flight most passengers ignored. When the turbulence came, it was small at first, a quick jolt that sent a few drinks sloshing over plastic cups. Nervous laughter rippled through the rows. The pilot's voice came over the intercom, warm and reassuring. "Ladies and gentlemen, just a patch of rough air, nothing to be concerned about. We'll be through it shortly." But Alara didn't laugh. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing toward the rear of the plane where two men had risen almost in unison. One slipped into the lavatory. The other lingered by the galley, speaking in hushed tones with someone seated near the bulkhead. Alara's breath slowed. She had seen this rhythm before. Not here, not on a civilian flight, but in training simulations and after-action reports buried under classified stamps. She unbuckled her belt, rose calmly, and approached the cockpit. A flight attendant intercepted her with a practiced smile. "Ma'am, I'm afraid the cockpit is off limits during flight." Alara lowered her voice. "I need to speak to the captain, now." The attendant hesitated. Something in Alara's eyes carried weight, but protocol was protocol. Still, she knocked gently on the reinforced cockpit door, murmured something, and within seconds the co-pilot cracked it open. Alara leaned in. Her voice was measured, steady. "There is a coordinated threat on board. You need to initiate secure protocol and divert immediately." The pilot, Captain Rogan Hale, turned in his seat. Mid-50s, seasoned, with the calm arrogance of someone who had seen everything at 30,000 feet. His eyes flicked over her civilian clothes and the absence of credentials. "Ma'am, I appreciate your concern, but unless you've got a badge or a flight manual, I suggest you return to your seat." Alara didn't flinch. "Listen carefully. The men in the rear galley are staging. One has already placed something in the lavatory. You are minutes from losing control of this aircraft." Rogan chuckled, shaking his head. "We get nervous flyers all the time. Please, let my crew do their job." She leaned closer, her whisper sharp enough to cut through his dismissal. "If you ignore this, people will die." The silence that followed was heavy. For a moment Rogan's eyes betrayed uncertainty. Then he straightened, forcing a confident smile. "Return to your seat. Everything is under control." She held his gaze a second longer, then stepped back, defeated not by doubt but by the arrogance of command. When she returned to her row, the man beside her gave a nervous laugh. "Let me guess, afraid of flying." Alara said nothing. Her eyes remained on the galley, where the two men now moved with deliberate slowness. The one from the lavatory returned, glancing subtly at the overhead bins. And then it began. The sound was muffled, almost like a heavy door slamming. The fuselage shuddered violently, trays clattering, passengers screaming as oxygen masks dropped from the ceiling. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, less confident now, almost panicked. "Ladies and gentlemen, remain seated. We're experiencing." Static swallowed the rest. Alara was already on her feet, gripping the headrest in front of her. She scanned the aisle. 3 men had risen now, not 2. Their movements were rehearsed, their eyes cold. The man nearest the galley unzipped his jacket, revealing the crude outline of an explosive vest. The screams rose higher. "Alara Miles," she whispered to herself, steadying her breath. "Time to stop hiding." She reached under her seat, pulling free the leather satchel. Inside was nothing outwardly threatening. A notebook, a scarf, a battered paperback novel. But tucked in a hidden lining were tools of a profession that officially didn't exist. Her aisle mate stared at her in terror. "What are you, ton?" "Stay down," she ordered, her tone carrying an authority that brooked no argument. Chaos filled the cabin. Passengers shouted, children cried. The hijackers barked orders in a language most didn't understand. One fired a warning shot into the ceiling, the crack of the weapon deafening in the confined space. The plane dipped sharply, luggage spilled from overhead bins, oxygen masks swung wildly. Alara's eyes locked on the leader, the man with the vest. He scanned the crowd with a cruel smile, his hand hovering near the detonator. Her heartbeat slowed, her training taking over. She counted distances, angles, obstacles. Timing was everything. The pilot had ignored her. Now the entire aircraft was paying the price. And yet, in the shadows of the chaos, Alara knew something the hijackers didn't. She hadn't simply been a passenger on this flight. She had boarded with a mission of her own. A mission that had just begun. The cabin of Flight 417 had transformed from calm routine to raw chaos. The smell of gunpowder lingered in the recycled air. Passengers cowered in their seats, clutching children, whispering prayers. The leader of the hijackers stood tall in the aisle, detonator in hand, his vest bulging with wires and explosives. "Sit down. Nobody moves," he shouted, his accent sharp, his tone filled with conviction. Alara remained standing. Her eyes studied him with unnerving calm. He noticed, their gazes locked, predator against predator. "You," he barked, gesturing with the detonator. "Sit." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "If I sit, you'll never make it off this plane alive." The words unsettled him, though he masked it with a growl. Passengers looked at her in disbelief. Who was this woman who dared provoke him while everyone else trembled? From the cockpit came the captain's frantic voice, this time not on the intercom but muffled through the reinforced door. Alarms blared behind him. The plane was losing altitude, dipping dangerously. "Alara," she whispered to herself, forcing her focus. Timing, always timing. The hijacker in the galley pulled a knife, threatening a flight attendant. Another dragged a passenger into the aisle, pressing a pistol against his temple. The leader roared, "We are in control. No one interferes." Ilara's hand slipped into her satchel, fingers brushing over the hidden compartment. With a practiced motion, she slid free a compact object that resembled a pen. She clicked it once. A faint vibration hummed, a signal, not to anyone outside, but to the transmitter sewn into her jacket. The mission had always been risky. She had boarded under civilian disguise, tasked with monitoring suspected operatives. She had warned command about this group weeks ago, but the intelligence was dismissed. Low credibility, they called it, and now 30,000 feet above the Atlantic, their arrogance had consequences. The hijacker leader snarled at her defiance. "Who are you?" Ilara's voice was low, dangerous. "The last person you should have ignored." He lunged forward, grabbing a passenger's hair to use as a shield. But in that instant, the first explosion ripped through the rear lavatory. It wasn't the bomb he carried. It was the secondary device his accomplice had planted earlier, timed to sow panic. The plane shuddered violently. Oxygen masks swung like pendulums. Passengers screamed. The hijackers lost their footing for a split second. That was all Alara needed. She moved with lethal precision. The pen in her hand extended with a flick, a disguised tactical blade. In one motion, she slashed at the hijacker closest to her, his weapon clattering to the floor. A passenger kicked it away instinctively. The leader roared, pressing his thumb closer to the detonator. Alara lunged, grabbing his wrist. Their struggle was brutal, intimate, every muscle straining. The passengers gasped as they fought in the center of the aisle. Death in a small black switch. "Do it," he hissed. "We all die." Her voice was ice. "No, only you." With a twist, she drove her knee into his ribs, forcing his grip to falter. The detonator skidded across the floor, landing under row 18. A boy scrambled to kick it farther, adrenaline overriding fear. Gunshots cracked. One hijacker fired wildly, shattering an overhead bin, spraying luggage and sparks. The cabin plunged into screams. Alara didn't hesitate. She dove across seats, her blade flashing, taking down the second gunman before he could reload. The third hijacker retreated toward the galley, dragging the flight attendant with him. "Stay back," he shouted, knife at her throat. Alara froze, eyes locked on his. She lowered her blade, hands open. Passengers held their breath. Then the plane lurched again, dipping hard. The hijacker stumbled, his grip loosening. In that instant, the attendant shoved backward, breaking free. Alara's blade flew, a perfect arc striking his arm. The knife clattered to the floor. Silence followed, broken only by sobs and the low roar of the engines. The hijackers were down, but the danger wasn't over. Captain Hale's voice boomed from the cockpit, trembling with fear. "We've lost hydraulics. We can't level out." Alara sprinted toward the cockpit door, pounding on it. "Open it, now." Inside, the pilots hesitated. Then the lock clicked. She burst through, eyes scanning the panels. Warning lights flashed crimson, altitude dropping. Hale turned, pale and sweating. "You said this would happen. Who are you?" She shoved past him, strapping into the jump seat. Her hands flew over the controls with intimate familiarity. She spoke quickly, each word edged with urgency. "We're not losing this bird. Divert fuel flow, reroute hydraulics through the auxiliary system. Now." The co-pilot stared at her. "How do you know?" "Do it," she barked. For a moment they froze. Then instinct took over. They obeyed. The plane groaned in protest, but leveled slightly, the descent slowing. Hale's eyes widened. "You've flown this model before." Alara didn't look at him. Her focus was absolute. "I've flown worse, under fire, with less time. Just hold her steady." The ground control crackled over the radio, frantic voices demanding identification. Alara reached for the mic, then stopped. If she revealed her name and unit, everything would unravel. Instead, she spoke a phrase only a handful of officials would understand. "This is Flight 417. Spectre protocol initiated. Eyes only." The radio went dead silent. Then a single voice replied, hushed and urgent. "Understood. Diverting escorts." Within minutes, faint shapes appeared through the cockpit glass, fighter jets, flanking them on either side. The passengers gasped as they looked out the windows, seeing salvation and menace in equal measure. Alara leaned back, her face expressionless. She had prevented the detonation. She had saved the aircraft. But the mission was far from over, because the men she had just killed were only part of a larger web, and someone somewhere had planned for her to be here, on this very flight. The pilot looked at her, still pale. "What happens when we land?" Alara's eyes remained fixed on the horizon. "That depends on who meets us first."